Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to DPA on Law and Development. This is yet another session. Today is Monday, the 6th of June. And the topic of this session's discussion is the case of Peter Nwachukwu, Mr. Peter Nwachukwu, the husband of Osinachi Nwachukwu, the famous gospel artist who died tragically on April 8, 2022. When Osinachi died, the story went out that she had been a victim of domestic violence over a period of time, and fingers pointed at Peter as the man responsible for her death. There was an uproar. Domestic violence is something that has been endemic in Nigeria. It's so widespread, no institutions to fight domestic violence. We don't have adequate laws to fight against domestic violence. The police force is not trained. Our police officers are not trained to fight domestic violence. In Nigeria, a man could be beating his wife with blood gushing out, and the police will come upon him and not bother to arrest him. Instead, the police will plead with him and say, "Oh, guy, don't do. Oh, God, have mercy on her." This is an anomaly. When you see domestic violence occurring, a police officer must arrest immediately. When you see a serious threat of domestic violence, the police must act. The police must do everything to protect members of the family, victims of domestic violence, and make sure that none is subjected to violence in her own home. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And this is surprising because we know that domestic violence is responsible for a significant amount of homicide all over the country. It is a big surprise that a country that commits itself or pledges to maintain law and order and to keep people safe will fail to do something serious about domestic violence. The indolence, the silence, the seeming indifference of Nigerian government to cases of domestic violence seem to have been totally shattered with the death of Osinachi, as many people cried out now for justice. And as fingers pointed at Peter, the police quickly arrested Peter Nwachukwu and detained him. He's been in custody since a few days after the death of his wife, accused of killing his wife. All this while, we never heard what Peter had to say. We never heard his position. All there was what was said in the press. There is no doubt that emotions overwhelmed everybody. There is no doubt that in a case such as Osinachi, the outcry of the public will create emotional force that will drive the government to do something. We were not surprised, therefore, when recently the government filed 23 count charges against Peter Nwachukwu, bordering on domestic violence, including culpable homicide. That is the equivalent of murder. Peter was arraigned before the court last Friday. And when arraigned, Peter, of course, as expected, pleaded not guilty to all counts. But there is something very interesting about what happened last Friday. We were surprised to see Peter Nwachukwu arrive in court in handcuffs. And while in handcuffs, he was trying to protest his innocence to the press. That was an absurdity. How could a man in handcuffs be allowed to stand and address the press saying he was innocent? It shouldn't have happened that way. It was somewhat degrading and unfortunate that Peter had to do it that way. Peter's lawyers ought to have made sure that they address the press, not Peter. Those lawyers should have been there to address the press, and naturally they would have said that they believe in their client's story, they believe he's not guilty, and that the evidence will not implicate him. Unfortunately, the lawyers did not do that. They allowed Peter to be arguing his own innocence before the press. What an unfortunate sight. A man in handcuffs trying to convince the press that he was innocent. But you have to blame the prosecutor or the police officers, whoever it was whatever law enforcement authority was in charge of physically bringing Peter to court on that day made a blunder by allowing the poor guy to address the press. If it was necessary for Peter to address the press, he should have taken the handcuffs should have been taken off, so he could stand like everybody else and argue his case. So that was the beginning of series of absurdities in what happened on that day. We subsequently, after arraignment, of course, Peter was remanded in prison with culpable homicide. It is difficult to get bail. And with a case as sensitive as the case of Osinachi and Peter, we knew that no judge would grant bail under the circumstances. So no bail was granted to Peter. Instead, the judge remanded him in prison. But also, the judge ordered expedited trial. Expedited trial is in itself an irony. Why? Because the Constitution itself already provided that a person shall be tried in a manner that is fair, just, and timely. Speedy adjudication is essential. When a person is facing criminal trial, the worst thing you want to do to him is to delay the process. So it is the right you already have under the Constitution to be tried in an expedited, efficient, and effective manner. So when the court reemphasizes that and says there will be expedited trial, the irony is that it suggests that the court really has the choice of not conducting an expedited trial. But having said that, even when the court had ordered for an expedited trial, it doesn't mean that there will be expedited trial. We have seen cases where the court denied bail and ordered expedited trial, but in fact there was no expedited trial. Such expedited trials last for years. So what the judge said is understandable conceptually. As an alternative to releasing him on bail, the court offers to try him quickly enough. But it doesn't mean the court will try him quickly enough. What we believe is that Peter will subsequently come back for bail on other grounds, held grounds, and may prevail. Something else that is coming up, which is still a rumor at this point, but we're interested in investigating it, exploring it to confirm how truthful it is that the medical evidence being used, or medical evidence from the hospital where the lady died, or the hospital that performed the autopsy, that the medical evidence is suggesting a different cause of death. The medical evidence does not suggest that the death of Osinachi was caused by a physical force. If that were the case, then you can be sure that it is highly unlikely for the court to convict Peter for culpable homicide. But it doesn't mean that that's Peter Nwachukwu, it doesn't mean he will not be convicted of some of the other charges. Remember, there are 23 count charges. Each count constitutes an offense in itself. It is a statement of fact that alleges that he committed a crime punishable under the law. So if found guilty in any of the 23 counts, Peter Nwachukwu will become convicted and probably sent to prison. The gravity or the punishment he gets will depend on the offense for which he was convicted. It's very important to note this. But as I speak to you today, Peter Nwachukwu is in Kuje prison, and he was placed in a custody called Egypt. In Kuje prison, there are 4 custodies. The poorest of them, where they dump the poorest and the most wretched of the earth, is Egypt. I was surprised why Peter was placed in Egypt. He may not be a rich man, but the sensationalism of his case has somehow made his case sensitive and made him a well-known person. So to place him in Egypt, I have no idea what the prison authority is trying to do, but we shall be watching, we shall be investigating, and in subsequent sessions, I will explain more what is going on these cases. Thank you.